There's a quiet kind of wisdom that settles in after 50. You've seen enough, loved enough, lost enough, worked hard, kept promises, and probably bit your tongue more times than you can count. And somewhere along the way, you realize, not everything needs to be shared. In your younger years, being open felt like a virtue. You wanted to be honest, relatable, transparent. But now, you've earned something else, the right to hold certain things close. Not out of fear, not because you're hiding, but because your peace matters more than their curiosity. This stage of life isn't about proving anything. It's about protecting what you've built: your dignity, your relationships, and your emotional clarity. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is by knowing what to reveal and what to keep just for yourself. So in this video, we're diving into 9 things that smart, grounded people over 50 quietly keep to themselves. These aren't secrets of shame, they're boundaries of wisdom. If you've ever felt exhausted from oversharing, misunderstood by being too open, or judged for simply being honest, this is your sign that it's okay to be more selective. I'm your host, Gregory Lane, and I'm glad you're here. This channel is for thoughtful people who believe aging is not about fading, it's about refining what matters. Let's get into it. One of the first questions we're often asked, especially in casual American conversation, is, how old are you? And for years, we've answered without hesitation. We treat it like it's just trivia, a number, a timeline. But after 50, that number starts to carry weight, not because it defines us, but because other people start using it to define us. You say you're 68, and suddenly someone's speaking slower. You mention you're 72, and people start offering to carry things for you. You say, I'm turning 75 next year, and the room gets quiet like they're doing mental math on how much longer you've got. That's not about you. That's about age bias. Here in the US, ageism is subtle but real. And even when people mean well, knowing your age can shift how they see you. They may assume you're out of touch, or no longer capable, or worst of all, that your best days are behind you. But age doesn't define ability, it doesn't define energy, and it sure doesn't define relevance. That's why I've stopped sharing my number, not because I'm ashamed, but because it invites assumptions I don't need. And frankly, it's nobody's business. When you keep your age private, you give people a chance to know you, not their idea of what someone your age is supposed to be. You let your words, your presence, and your energy speak louder than a number ever could. Some of the sharpest, strongest, and most active people I know are in their late 70s. Some of the most exhausted and closed-minded are decades younger. Life isn't measured in years, it's measured in how you live them. So next time someone asks your age and you feel that little hesitation in your gut, remember this: you're allowed to smile and say, old enough to know better, young enough to still enjoy it. Because how you move through the world is more important than the number on your driver's license. Money. It's the one topic that makes everyone either lean in or silently judge. By the time we're in our 50s, 60s, or 70s, we've been through financial storms and seasons of calm. We've made mistakes, caught lucky breaks, helped others, and maybe been taken advantage of once or twice. But one of the smartest things I ever learned: your financial life should be like your PIN number. Personal and protected. Here's the hard truth: people treat you differently based on what they think you have or don't have. Tell someone you've done well for yourself, and suddenly you're the rich uncle or the golden sibling. Now they expect you to pick up the check, lend a little, co-sign something, fund a dream they never worked for. And if you're not in a strong place financially, there's a different reaction: pity, assumptions, or unsolicited advice about how you should have invested better or downsized sooner. It's like people forget that life happens to everyone. One man I know, Charlie, retired early after selling his auto repair business in Cincinnati. Nothing flashy, but he did well. Thought he'd finally be able to relax. But after he casually mentioned it to a few family members, things started to change. His niece asked for help with a down payment. His brother wanted a short-term loan. Even his church subtly hinted at a donation campaign he might be interested in. Charlie wasn't being stingy, but he started to feel like a wallet with a heartbeat instead of a person. Money conversations, especially with family or old friends, can shift dynamics fast. Jealousy can creep in, expectations grow legs, and people who once saw you as an equal start viewing you as a resource. That's why smart people keep their financial details close. It's not secrecy, it's self-respect. You can be generous without advertising your bank balance. You can live well without explaining how. As they say, wealth whispers. Let yours do the same. And if you're someone who didn't retire with a big cushion, maybe you had medical expenses, supported others, or simply lived through tough times, that's nobody's business either. You're not defined by your 401k. You're not your credit score. You're not your tax return. What matters more? Your values, your heart, your ability to live a good life with what you have, and the wisdom to know what matters most. So, whether you've got 6 figures in the market or you're budgeting week by week, keep that story close, because the less people know about your money, the more freedom you have to live on your terms, not theirs. There's an old saying, every family has a story, and most of it isn't meant for the neighbors. By the time we reach our later years, we've seen the beautiful and the broken parts of our families, the joy of weddings, the sting of divorces, long-standing grudges, tense Thanksgivings, the cousin who vanished, the sibling who won't speak to anyone. Every family has layers, and while it can be tempting to talk about ito vent, to just be honest, to explain why things are the way they are, oversharing family problems rarely brings peace. What it often brings is judgment, gossip, or even more division. Let me tell you about someone I met at a grief support group in Tucson. Pauline, 74, kind eyes, raised 3 kids solo, worked as a nurse for 30 years. She once opened up to a neighbor about how her son hadn't called in over a year, just needed to get it off her chest. That neighbor, meaning well, told someone else. Who told someone else? Before long, people at her church started whispering, asking questions, making comments. It didn't take long for that story to reach her daughter-in-law, who took it personally. The silence between them grew even colder. What started as a vulnerable moment became a wedge. Why? Because when you tell people about private family issues, they don't always see the full picture. They judge, they label, and worst of all, they might carry those opinions into your loved ones' lives. You may be trying to explain, but they hear you assigning blame. You may be hoping for understanding, but they offer pity or unsolicited advice. You may just need to get it off your chest, but instead, you've handed your family story to someone who doesn't deserve it. When we keep family struggles private, we're not being fake. We're being loyal, respectful, wise. You can still process, still reflect, still heal, but do it with someone safe: a therapist, a journal, a long walk under the Arizona sun, not the coffee shop, not the gossip-prone neighbor, not a public post online. Because here's the truth: family dynamics shift over time. What's broken now might mend later. What's confusing now might someday make sense. But if you've aired it all out in the open, that door to reconciliation gets harder to walk through. Too many people have opinions about a story that wasn't theirs to begin with. Privacy creates space, and space makes room for grace. So the next time someone casually asks, "How's your son doing these days?" or "Whatever happened with your sister?" you don't owe them a headline. You can just say, "We're figuring things out," because at the end of the day, your family is not public property, and your peace is worth more than a moment of emotional relief. It starts with something simple: a sore knee, a new prescription, a follow-up appointment. You mention it over lunch with a friend, or in passing to your daughter. "Doctor put me on something for blood pressure." Seems harmless, but before long, you're getting texts twice a day. "Did you take your pill? Maybe you shouldn't be driving anymore. Should I call your doctor for you?" Suddenly, you're not just a person, they see you as a patient. And the worst part? You didn't even feel sick. Health is personal. Yes, it's a reality of aging. Yes, it's important to stay on top of it, but sharing every ache, every pill bottle, every diagnosis, it often does more harm than good, especially emotionally. Let me tell you about Richard, a 69-year-old retired firefighter from Michigan. Still sharp, still active, had a cholesterol issue and mentioned it in a group text to his family, just being honest. What followed? His son started forwarding him articles on plant-based diets. His daughter sent a list of cardiologists, just in case, and his brother called every week asking, "How's your heart doing?" Richard didn't feel supported. He felt managed, watched, like he'd crossed some invisible line from dad to case file. The truth is, once you reveal health details, especially in a society where aging is viewed with fear, people start writing a script for you. They fill in blanks you never gave them. You say, "I've been feeling a little tired lately." They hear, "He's declining." You say, "Doctor wants to monitor something." They hear, "We should take the car keys." It's not that people don't care. It's that they care too loudly, too clumsily, and often without asking what you need. There's also the other side. Say too much about medications or conditions in casual conversation, and suddenly your identity becomes the person with high blood pressure or the one who takes insulin. Even your social circles begin to shrink you down to your prescriptions. But you are so much more than a chart or a list of symptoms. You are memory and wisdom and stories. You are resilience. You are joy. You are still here living, not just managing. And yes, if there's something serious, something that requires support, by all means, bring in the people you trust. But do it on your terms. Not because you're expected to, not because you need validation, but because you've decided to share and with people who listen, not control. It's okay to keep some things between you and your doctor. It's okay to take your meds, adjust your routines, and stay strong quietly. You don't owe anyone a health report. This isn't a board meeting. Protect your energy. Protect your narrative, because the more people know, the more they assume. And in this season of life, assumptions can take away your power. Let them see your smile, your steps, your spirit. Let them see you living, not listing symptoms. There's this strange myth in our culture that after a certain age, love and intimacy just fade away. That after 60, passion disappears and romance becomes irrelevant. Let me be clear. That's nonsense. In fact, for many, love gets deeper with age. We stop chasing fireworks and start craving warmth. We trade drama for trust, lust for laughter, speed for stillness. But here's something that's just as true. The more sacred the connection, the less it needs an audience. Let me tell you about Thomas, 72, a retired architect from North Carolina. He lost his wife 7 years ago, thought romance was behind him until he met Annie at a local photography class. They started spending time together. Afternoon walks, jazz concerts, slow dinners. It was beautiful, quiet, healing, until he mentioned it to his daughter. Not in detail, just a passing comment. "I've been seeing someone." The next day came the questions. "Is this serious? Are you sure she's not after your money? Do you think Mom would approve?" Thomas wasn't looking for judgment, or opinions, or defense. He was just trying to share something good. But instead of support, he felt scrutinized. And that's the danger of oversharing your romantic life in your later years. Not because there's shame in love, but because other people's perceptions can chip away at the joy you've earned. You see, intimacy isn't just physical. It's emotional, spiritual. It's the hand you reach for in the dark, the person who knows your favorite coffee, and the quiet ache behind your smile. It's yours, and it's nobody else's business. Whether you're rediscovering love after loss, rekindling a long marriage, or enjoying companionship that doesn't fit into neat labels, you don't need to justify it. You don't need to explain, or defend, or overshare. And in a world that still clings to outdated ideas about aging and sexuality, the best thing you can do is protect the beauty you've built. Because here's the truth. Once you start sharing the details, show often you see each other, how close you've become, whether you've spent the night. People start assigning opinions, and those opinions have a way of worming their way into your confidence. That closeness, that sparkle, that second chance at tenderness, let it breathe in private. There's nothing wrong with being open about companionship, but be selective. Honor the privacy that makes your connection special. Let love grow where no one's peeking through the blinds. Because in this season of life, real intimacy isn't loud, it's steady, it's warm, and it doesn't need a spotlight to thrive. So if someone asks, "Are you seeing anyone these days?" you're allowed to smile and say, "I'm spending time with someone special," and leave it at that. Let them wonder. Let love stay sacred. There's a reason the phrase, "give quietly," has been passed down through generations. It's not just about humility, it's about dignity. For you and for the people you help. These days, it feels like every act of generosity is expected to come with a social media post, a receipt, or a story. But the truth? The most powerful giving is the kind no one sees. Let's talk about George, 74. A retired public school principal from Ohio. Steady, modest, never flashy. One winter, he quietly paid the heating bill for a neighbor down the street, a young mom going through a rough patch. He didn't tell a soul, not even his kids. He just did it. But a few months later, his son found out through that neighbor. And suddenly the questions started. Why didn't you tell us? Do you do this kind of thing often? Are you being taken advantage of? What had been an act of pure kindness turned into a family debate about boundaries and financial responsibility. George didn't regret the help, but he did wish he'd kept it to himself. Here's why. When you share your giving, even with the best intentions, you risk shifting the focus from the act to the ego, from the impact to the attention, and that dilutes the meaning. Quiet generosity doesn't need applause. It doesn't need a panel of family judges to weigh in. It just needs your heart. And not only that, it protects the dignity of the people you're helping. Think about it. When you give and talk about it, you may unintentionally put someone else in a vulnerable light. They didn't ask to be a lesson or a story. They just needed help. And you gave it. That's enough. Whether it's slipping a little cash to someone in need, volunteering behind the scenes, or supporting a cause close to your heart, do it because it's right, not because it earns you praise. And yes, even your own family doesn't always need to know how generous you are, because sometimes, the moment they do, the questions begin. Why them and not me? Why didn't you tell us before? Is that really a smart way to give? Suddenly, your selfless act becomes a conversation about money, fairness, even judgment. So protect the purity of your generosity. Let it be soft. Let it be yours. And remember, you don't need to tweet it. You don't need a thank you card. You don't need to post a photo of the food bank or the scholarship fund or the donation box. You just need to keep giving like no one's watching. Because when no one's watching, that's when your heart is loudest. As they say, true wealth is measured by how much you'd give away, even if no one knew. And if they ask what you've been up to lately, smile and say, just doing my part. That's all the story they need. When you've lived a full life, you carry a long list of victories, big and small. The business you built, the kids you raised, the battles you fought, the degrees, promotions, and hard-won wisdom. You've earned your stripes. But here's the quiet truth. The more you talk about your achievements, the less they shine. Let me tell you about Leonard, 71, a retired Navy officer from Tampa. Disciplined, kind, and deeply respected, he had led rescue missions, mentored younger sailors, even received a Medal of Honor. But when you met Leonard, you wouldn't know any of that. Not because he was hiding it, but because he didn't need to say it. He let his calm speak louder than his credentials. His humility carried more weight than any medal ever could. Now, compare that to someone we've all met, the person who brings up their resume in every conversation. I ran my own company for 30 years. I've traveled to 40 countries. I was on the board of this, the chair of that. Sure, it's impressive, but over time, it starts to sound like a defense, not confidence, and it creates distance instead of connection. Here's the thing. Your past successes matter, just not in every room. When you constantly recount your wins, people may stop listening with admiration and start listening with exhaustion, especially your children, your grandchildren. To them, you're already legendary if you don't overdo it. There's also something sacred about letting your story unfold naturally. When you share your victories only when asked, or when they genuinely relate to the moment, they land deeper. They inspire more. They teach without preaching. It's the difference between showing a photo album and forcing someone to flip through it. You don't need to remind the world of what you've done. You're living proof of it. The way you hold yourself, the advice you give without bragging, the way you listen before you speak. That's what sticks. That's what your grandchildren will remember. Not the awards, but the way you made people feel. So, if you're tempted to bring up your old titles, your achievements, your accolades, pause. Ask yourself, am I sharing this to connect or to be seen? Does this moment need my past or just my presence? Because when you lead with humility, your impact echoes louder than any story ever could. Real respect is earned in silence. And your legacy, it's already speaking every time you show up with grace instead of ego. So let the trophies gather dust. Let the stories stay sacred, and trust that your quiet power says more than words ever will. We've all been there. That moment in the quiet of the evening when an old insult sneaks back into your thoughts. Something someone said decades ago, maybe a parent, a sibling, a boss, a friend, and suddenly you're right back in that room, feeling it all over again. But here's the truth about pain from the past. You don't have to carry it in your pocket, and you don't have to tell everyone about it to let it go. Let me tell you about Alvin, 73, a former small business owner from Missouri. In his 40s, his brother betrayed him in a business deal that nearly ruined him. They didn't speak for years. The pain was deep, layered with betrayal, shame, and family tension. But when Alvin turned 70, something changed. He stopped telling the story, not because it stopped hurting, but because he stopped needing to prove how hurt he was. That's what many of us don't realize. Sometimes we repeat these stories, the betrayals, the insults, the unfairness, because we want others to validate our pain, to say, that wasn't right, or you didn't deserve that. And you know what? You probably didn't. But constantly reopening those wounds by retelling the story doesn't heal them, it keeps them raw. And worse, it can start to define how people see you. You're not the person who was cheated. You're not the person who was disrespected. You're not the one who was left out, overlooked, or misunderstood. You're more. Much more. There's wisdom in silence, grace in letting people assume you've lived without needing to explain your scars, not because they didn't happen, but because they don't own you anymore. And when you share your old wounds too often, people may start to treat you like someone who's stuck, as if your best years are behind you, as if you're defined by what hurt you instead of what healed you. That's not the story you want to write. You want to be remembered for the way you moved forward, for the way you loved anyway, for the way you smiled again even after what happened. So here's a thought. Next time you feel the urge to tell someone about that old insult, that family rift, that friend who betrayed you, pause, breathe, and choose peace. You can still heal privately. You can still process the past in a journal, a prayer, a walk in the woods. But you don't need to hand it to everyone who walks into your life. Protect your energy, protect your dignity. Let your healing be your strength, not your story. Because at this point in life, the goal isn't to win the argument. It's to win your peace back. By the time we reach our 60s or 70s, we've collected more than memories. We've gathered principles, little truths that helped us survive, mantras, prayers, rituals, beliefs that kept us steady when the world felt upside down. But here's a powerful truth. Not every belief needs an audience. In today's world, where everyone seems eager to explain what they think, defend what they feel, or convert someone else, silence can be a form of strength. Take Walter, a 75-year-old retired teacher in Oregon. Every morning for the past 20 years, he started his day the same way: a quiet cup of coffee, one handwritten affirmation, and 5 minutes of stillness by the window. No one told him to do it. He doesn't post about it. He doesn't even mention it to his grandkids. But that simple act grounds him. It's his anchor, not for the world to applaud, but for his own soul to hold on to. Now, could Walter explain it? Of course. Could he write a book about his process? Probably. But he chooses not to. Why? Because some beliefs lose their power when they're exposed to noise. Not everyone will understand the sacred things that guide you, and that's okay. They don't have to. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the mantras you whisper in the dark, the meditations you keep private, the verses that live in your back pocket, or the quiet rules by which you lead your life. Sharing your beliefs, especially the deeply personal ones, can sometimes invite skepticism, misunderstanding, or even mockery. Not because people mean to be cruel, but because they don't know the battles you fought that made those beliefs necessary. And here's the other thing. When we constantly explain or defend what we believe, we start depending on others to validate what already gives us peace. You don't need a cheer section to believe in what holds you together. Whether it's your faith, your philosophy, your little morning rituals, or a line from a book that changed your life, keep it sacred. Keep it personal. That's where its power lives. Let it shape you from the inside. Let it inform how you treat people, how you handle stress, how you walk through the world, and trust that your presence, not your explanation, is what people will feel. So, if you have a belief that helps you stand tall when life gets heavy, hold it close. Let it be your secret strength, and let your life, your calm, your kindness, your quiet confidence speak louder than any sermon ever could. Because, in the end, it's not what we say that defines us. It's how we live.